The pellet was administered, and such awful agonies immediately set in that the distracted mamma bade a sympathetic neighbor run for Mother Know-all. The neighbor ran, and in came a brisk little old lady in cap and specs, with a bundle of herbs under her arm, which she at once applied in all sorts of funny ways, explaining their virtues as she clapped a plantain poultice here, put a pounded catnip plaster there, or tied a couple of mullein leaves round the sufferer's throat. Instant relief ensued. The dying child sat up and demanded baked beans. The grateful parent offered $50, but Mother Know-all indignantly refused it and went smiling away, declaring that a neighborly turn needed no reward, and a doctor's fee was all a humbug. The audience were in fits of laughter over this scene, for Rose imitated Mrs. Atkinson capitally, and the herb cure was a good hit at the excellent lady's belief that "yarbs" would save mankind if properly applied. No one enjoyed it more than herself, and the saucy children prepared for the grand finale in high feather. This closing scene was brief but striking, for two trains of cars whizzed in from opposite sides, met with a terrible collision in the middle of the stage, and a general smash-up completed the word catastrophe. Now let us act a proverb. I've got one all ready, said Rose, who was dying to distinguish herself in some way before Uncle Alec. So everyone but Mac, the gay Westerner, and Rose took their places on the rocky seats and discussed the late, beautiful, and varied charade, in which Pokey frankly pronounced her own scene the bestest of all. In 5 minutes the curtain was lifted. Nothing appeared but a very large sheet of brown paper pinned to a tree, and on it was drawn a clock face, the hands pointing to 4. A small note below informed the public that 4 a.m. was the time. Hardly had the audience grasped this important fact when a long, waterproof serpent was seen uncoiling itself from behind a stump. An inchworm, perhaps, would be a better description, for it traveled in the same humpy way as that pleasing reptile. Suddenly a very wide awake and active fowl advanced, pecking, chirping, and scratching vigorously. A tuft of green leaves waved upon his crest, a larger tuft of brakes made an umbrageous tail, and a shawl of many colors formed his flapping wings. A truly noble bird, whose legs had the genuine strut, whose eyes shone watchfully, and whose voice had a ring that evidently struck terror into the caterpillar's soul, if it was a caterpillar. He squirmed, he wriggled, he humped as fast as he could, trying to escape, but all in vain. The tufted bird espied him, and flapped triumphant, or espied him, gave one warbling sort of crow, pounced upon him, and flapped triumphantly away. That early bird got such a big worm he could hardly carry him off, laughed Aunt Jessie, as the children shouted over the joke suggested by Mac's nickname. That is one of Uncle's favorite proverbs, so I got it up for his especial benefit, said Rose, coming up with a two-legged worm beside her. Very clever. What next? Asked Dr. Alec as she sat down beside him. The Dove boys are going to give us an incident in the life of Napoleon, as they call it. The children think it very splendid, and the little fellows do it rather nicely, answered Mac with condescension. A tent appeared, and pacing to and fro before it was a little sentinel, who, in a brief soliloquy, informed the observers that the elements were in a great state of confusion, that he had marched some 100 miles or so that day, and that he was dying for want of sleep. Then he paused, leaned upon his gun, and seemed to doze, dropped slowly down, overpowered with slumber, and finally lay flat, with his gun beside him, a faithless little sentinel. Enter Napoleon, cocked hat, gray coat, high boots, folded arms, grim mouth, and a melodramatic stride. Freddie Dove always covered himself with glory in this part, and took the stage with a Napoleonic attitude that brought down the house. For the big-headed boy with solemn dark eyes and square brow was the very moral of that rascal Bonaparte, Mother Atkinson said. Some great scheme was evidently brewing in his mighty mind. A trip across the Alps, a bonfire at Moscow, or a little skirmish at Waterloo, perhaps, for he marched in silent majesty till suddenly a gentle snore disturbed the imperial reverie. He saw the sleeping soldier and glared upon him, saying in an awful tone, Ha! Asleep at his post. Death is the penalty. He must die. Picking up the musket, he is about to execute summary justice, as emperors are in the habit of doing, when something in the face of the weary sentinel appears to touch him. And well it might, for a most engaging little warrior was Jack as he lay with his shako half off, his childish face trying to keep sober, and a great black mustache over his rosy mouth. It would have softened the heart of any Napoleon, and the little corporal proved himself a man by relenting, and saying with a lofty gesture of forgiveness, "Brave fellow, he is worn out. I will let him sleep and mount guard in his place." Then, shouldering the gun, this noble being strode to and fro with a dignity which thrilled the younger spectators. The sentinel awaits, sees what has happened, and gives himself up for lost. But the emperor restores his weapon, and with that smile which won all hearts, says, pointing to a high rock whereon a crow happens to be sitting, "Be brave, be vigilant, and remember that from yonder pyramid generations are beholding you." And with those memorable words he vanishes, leaving the grateful soldier bolt upright, with his hand at his temple, and deathless devotion stamped upon his youthful countenance. The applause which followed this superb piece had hardly subsided when a sudden splash and a shrill cry caused a general rush toward the waterfall that went gamboling down the rocks, singing sweetly as it ran. Pokey had tried to gambol also, and had tumbled into a shallow pool, whither Jamie had gallantly followed, in a vain attempt to fish her out, and both were paddling about, half frightened, half pleased with the unexpected bath. This mishap made it necessary to get the dripping infants home as soon as possible, so the wagons were loaded up, and away they went, as merry as if the mountain air had really been oxygenated sweets, not bitters, as Dr. Alex suggested when Max said he felt as jolly as if he had been drinking champagne instead of the currant wine that came with a great frosted cake wreathed with sugar roses and Aunt Plenty's hamper of goodies. Rose took part in all the fun and never betrayed by look or word the twinges of pain she suffered in her ankle. She excused herself from the games in the evening, however, and sat talking to Uncle Alec in a lively way that both amazed and delighted him, for she confided to him that she played horse with the children, drilled with the light infantry, climbed trees, and did other dreadful things that would have caused the aunts to cry aloud if they knew of them. "I don't care a pin what they say if you don't mind, uncle," she answered when he pictured the dismay of the good ladies. "Ah, it's all very well to defy them, but you are getting so rampant I'm afraid you will defy me next. And then where are we?" "No, I won't. I shouldn't dare, because you are my guardian and can put me in a straitjacket if you like." And Rose laughed in his face, even while she nestled closer with a confiding gesture pleasant to see. "Upon my word, Rosie, I begin to feel like the man who beat an elephant and then didn't know what to do with him. I thought I had got a pet and plaything for years to come, but here you are, growing up like a beanstalk, and I shall find I've got a strong-minded little woman on my hands before I can turn round. There's a predicament for a man and an uncle." Dr. Alec's comic distress was mercifully relieved, for the time being, by a dance of goblins on the lawn, where the children, with pumpkin lanterns on their heads, frisked about like will-o'-the-wisps as a parting surprise. When Rose went to bed, she found that Uncle Alec had not forgotten her, for on the table stood a delicate little easel, holding two miniatures set in velvet. She knew them both, and stood looking at them till her eyes brimmed over with tears that were both sweet and sad, for they were the faces of her father and mother, beautifully copied from portraits fast fading away. Presently she knelt down and putting her arms round the little shrine, kissed one after the other, saying with an earnest voice, "I'll truly try to make them glad to see me by and by." And that was Rose's little prayer on the night of her 14th birthday. 2 days later, the Campbells went home, a larger party than when they came, for Dr. Alec was escort, and Kitty Comet was borne in state in a basket, with a bottle of milk, some tiny sandwiches, and a doll's dish to drink out of, as well as a bit of carpet to lie on in her palace car, out of which she kept popping her head in the most fascinating manner. There was a great kissing and cuddling, waving of handkerchiefs, and last good-byes as they went. And when they had started, Mother Atkinson came running after them to tuck in some little pies, hot from the oven, for the dears who might get tired of bread and butter during that long day's travel. Another start and another halt, for the Snow Children came shrieking up to demand the 3 kittens that Pokey was coolly carrying off in a traveling bag. The unhappy kits were rescued, half smothered, and restored to their lawful owners amid dire lamentation from the little kidnapper, who declared that she only took them 'cause they'd want to go with their sister Tommy. Start number 3 and stoppage number 3, as Frank hailed them with the luncheon basket, which had been forgotten after everyone had protested that it was safely in. All went well after that, and the long journey was pleasantly beguiled by Pokey and Pussy, who played together so prettily that they were considered public benefactors. Rose doesn't want to go home, for she knows the aunts won't let her rampage as she did up at Cozy Corner, said Mac as they approached the old house. I can't rampage if I want to, for a time at least. I'll tell you why. I sprained my ankle when I tumbled off of Barkis, and it gets worse and worse, though I've done all I know to cure it and hide it, so it shouldn't trouble anyone, whispered Rose, knitting her brows with pain, as she prepared to descend, wishing her uncle would take her instead of her bundles. How he did it, she never knew, but Mac had her up the steps and on the parlor sofa before she could put her foot to the ground. There you are, right side up with care. And mind, now, if your ankle bothers you and you are laid up with it, I am to be your footman. It's only fair, you know, for I don't forget how good you have been to me. And Mac went to call Phoebe, so full of gratitude and goodwill that his very goggles shone. And that is the end of chapter 14.